Carpe Diem is a small specialist company that I set up last year to organise cultural tours and pilgrimages to various parts of Ireland. Ireland is dotted with sacred spaces and places of pilgrimage, and I am convinced that more and more people want to seek these out today. My first pilgrimage last year was to Skellig Michael. Scellig Michael is a barren, windswept rock off the south coast of Kerry. At the top of this rock lies an ancient monastic settlement that was home to a group of monks until about the year 1000 AD. We were accompanied on this pilgrimage by 3 special people from Glenstal Abbey, a Benedictine monastery in Maru, County Limerick, Ireland, who helped us to understand and interpret the experience as we went along. I hope to make this the hallmark of the cultural tours and pilgrimages that I will be organising this year and in the future. The presence of a guide and expert to tell the story and enhance the experience for the modern day pilgrim.
This is the point of pilgrimage. Trying to immerse yourself in God, in your own familiar home surroundings, is like going swimming in your clothes. First you need to strip off the cumbersome and the mundane, then take the plunge. A pilgrimage has 3 basic elements: a journey, a threshold, a silence. When we cross the threshold of a sacred space, we enter into an altered state of mind. Our presence then adds to the accumulated holiness of that place. Desecration is to enter a sacred place in an unaltered state of mind. On the summit of Mount Sinai, on the road to Santiago, God does not stand any closer or speak any louder, but we listen better. Consider the medieval bishops in the tribunal that tried Jeanne d'Arc, Joan of Arc. They were fascinated by someone who claimed to hear the voices of saints. Was it for real? If you have never heard the voices, it may be simply because you never expected to. You never stopped to listen.
It looks like I'm not alone. I'm not the only person about to head 8 kilometres off the Kerry coast to climb a rock shooting 700 feet straight out of the Atlantic Ocean.
I've been 3 times to the Skelligs, and I've never been there because I organised it myself. I have been drawn there by the Holy Spirit. And it's very difficult to get out sometimes onto the islands, but every time I've gone, I found that it was possible to get there. So I took that as an indication that I was meant to be there, and it's one of the most extraordinary places anybody could go to. It is one of the places, I would say, where you are nearest to God. And that's because of the geography and because of it's like a monastery out beyond on the very edge of the world. And we're only, I suppose, tiny inhabitants of it. The birds that are there, it's just extraordinary. The puffins and the storm petrels and the gannets, they are worshipping God. Long before we ever got there. So I find that it is one of the places I would love to go every time I felt I hadn't connected sufficiently with God, and I'd be brought back then to a connection.
Father Sean O'Dean from Glenstal Abbey in Maroe, County Limerick, is well known as a Celtic scholar and an expert in early Christian Ireland.
Well, I would say firstly that the life in Skellig Michael was rather unusual, even for its time, because of the situation of the place. There's a mighty rock in the middle of the sea. But I'd say the life they lived at the same time, it followed the usual pattern of monastic life at that period. First of all would be the Tracha Canonta, the divine office, singing the psalms together several times during the day. And this is actually what we do here at Glenstal in a slightly different way. But this would be common to all forms of monasticism, the saying of the psalms and getting into contact with God in that way. Now, obviously, the object of the whole thing, of monasticism in general, is to get into contact with God. That God is the supreme object of our desire, and fulfillment comes through union with Him. So I'd say life was particularly difficult, and I'm inclined to think that while you had a resident community there, probably of 12 monks and an abbot, following the pattern of Christ and the 12 apostles, and there are actually 6 clochorns there, with 2 people in each clochorn. The idea was to get into contact with God through nature. And I think this is what differentiated Celtic monasticism to a large extent, and Celtic religion in general, from other forms of the Catholic Church, that there was an emphasis on nature, the dúlra, and even the name of God is Rian an Úl, the God of the elements, of earth, air, fire and water. Now in Scellig Michael, with the rocks, the sea, the birds, you were in direct contact with nature all the time, and God was displaying Himself in a most dramatic way, in the extremes of nature, the storms, the raging sea, the sea beating against the rocks, the changing seasons, the screaming of the birds and so on. There, this was called the Rat Aganta, the way of nature, and God displayed Himself to mankind through nature. And here it was done very dramatically, more than in the ordinary level land of the inside.
In the graveyard belonging to the monastery, you introduced a very simple but powerful ritual.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about where that came from and its significance?
A way back, just after the time of Christ, one Greek author said that the Celts have this habit of worshipping the gods turning to the right. And what he means is the people, one by one, they went around a statue of the god or the holy object, like a holy well or a graveyard. And you must go dishel, right-handed, keeping the sacred object at your right hand. And this puts you in harmony with the sun. The sun goes round that way. So you put yourself into harmony with the heavenly bodies. So you're putting yourself into harmony with the whole creation, the whole cosmic order. And this is very important for us today with the idea of harmony with the earth, the whole question of ecology and what's happened to us by defying that law. The main part of the ritual is doing the rounds, as I said, holy wells. You go around the holy well or the graveyard 3 times dishel, following the course of the sun. You must go this way. You take 9 stones in your hand beforehand, small stones, and at the end of every round you drop a stone. A traditional way of summoning people to a ritual is by blowing a horn, cow's horn, knocks.
Peace is flowing like a river, flowing out through you and me, spreading out into the desert, setting all our spirits free. Love is flowing like a river, flowing out through you and me.
The present world is full of noise, first of all, and most people are afraid of silence, and the language of God is basically silence. That's why the Skelligs is a wonderful place to go, because of the sea all around you and the sound of the birds. That's all that's there. To find places where there's no human noise or artificial noise is very difficult. So we shut out God a lot in our particular culture, but I think most people who want to find will do so, and Ireland is full of places where that can be possible.
According to the scholars, the reason why the monks left Skellig was because of a change of climate, more or less as we're enduring now. And there have been a change in climate down along the centuries, and all of them apparently for the worst. You know, and the climate was getting colder and wetter, and they were forced to come to Skellig, maybe the 11th, 12th, 13th century.
Nowadays, people are much freer, and so they do find different traditions and different ways of relating to God. And we hear that there are 7 billion people on the planet, and therefore I would say there are 7 billion ways of connecting with God.
Well, it was a very interesting day. The pilgrimage really began on the quay side at Portmagee, where we boarded numerous boats, about 12 to a boat I think it was, and as it happened, the boats hadn't been able to travel for many days because of the weather, and we were just very fortunate that that was a beautiful sunny day and we were able to go. And it was a long trip on the boat, and a lot of people were very nervous because we're not used to going out in small boats, and the sea creates its own fear in people. And as we progressed out, there was a dynamic between the people on the boat, sort of a helping of each other through the fear aspect. And then we got to the island, and some of us saw the steps and balked, and some of us climbed, and I was one of the ones that balked. But even that I didn't climb to the top, I found it a most enthralling experience to stand on the island and to meditate and think about the people that had been there over all the centuries. And the people who went up to the top met pilgrims who weren't attached to our group, and they came back down and spoke about their wonderful experience. And because I was standing there, they spoke to me. And that was a revelation that so many strangers just happened upon the lovely ritual that happened on the top of the island. And then we journeyed back and looked at all the birds on the small island, and we came back to the guest house. And there was a whole dynamic between all the people that were there, where we each gave very freely of our experiences. And it was very revealing, and people were very trusting of each other, and nobody felt that they couldn't say what they felt able to say. So it was a wonderful experience all round. If I was to single out one moment, it was the time I spent at the base of the steps on my own, and the silence and the being part of the sea and part of nature, and just thinking about the people who had been on that island before me over the many, many centuries. It was a magical experience, and it wasn't something I expected when I went there that day.